Hello! Now in this video we will discuss the importance of knowing the who. And no, I do not mean the band or the doctor. But I will begin by conversationally reading John chapter 1 verses 19 through 28 from the World English Bible. And afterwards I'm going to share two nuances that I heard from reading these verses that point me in this direction. For it is such nuances that are helping me find the abundance in the abundant life. Then I'm going to ask you what you think. Ready? Here we go. Now my name is Charles Yerkes and this is the Simple, Not Shallow YouTube channel. Now for some time I have been on a journey, one of learning how to live in the abundance of the abundant life that Jesus said He came to give. That is, I have been learning how to love. Simply, wisely, and well. And the whole purpose of this channel is to create a community that gets together and talks about finding this abundance. It's a place to catch the excitement of learning to love. Thank you for joining me. So, the importance of knowing who. Let's begin by reading John, chapter 1, verses 19 through 28. So this is John's testimony, when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask, "Who are you?" Well, he declared, and he did not deny, but he declared, "I am not the Christ." So they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He says, "No, I am not." "Are you the prophet then?" He says, "No." So they said therefore to him, "Well, who are you? Give us an answer to take back to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness to make straight the way of the Lord," well, as is found in the prophet Isaiah. Now the ones who had been sent were from the Pharisees, and so they asked him, "Well, why then do you baptize, if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" So John answered them, "I baptize in water, but among you stands one whom you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, who is preferred before me, and whose sandal strap I am not worthy to loosen." Now these things were done in Bethany, beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. And that was the book of John, chapter 1, verses 19 through 28. Ready for some nuance? Hope so, because here we go. Now, the first nuance is that just being religious and even very devoutly get dedicated to religious practices is not a guarantee that you know God or that you know Jesus. So this comes from reading verses 19 through 24, and it involves the Pharisees, who they had sent, and how appropriate it was that they should be questioning John. See, the Pharisees were among the top religious leaders of their day. Indeed, they took their religion very, very seriously. The whole emphasis of theirs was one of preventing the people from breaking the law, or what they would consider sinning. Yes, Jesus did have some very stern things to say to them a little later on, but it must never be forgotten that He also said about them that, well, He says, "For I tell you the truth, that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, there is no way you will enter into the kingdom of heaven." Now that was from John chapter 5, verse 20. See, the Pharisees were not bad people, but they were blinded by the seriousness with which they took both their religion and themselves. Anyway, back to the very first nuance. See, being the religious leaders, part of their charge was to protect the people, to protect them from false teachers and false teaching. It was their responsibility to expose and condemn false teaching in order to keep the people from falling into worshiping a different god, a false god. So, it was natural for them to be asking such questions about John, asking for his credentials. This was fitting, this was proper. It will also be natural for them a little later on to ask Jesus such questions. Okay? And the asking of such questions is still fitting today. Yet, John gives an insight into the problem that the Pharisees have. See, in verse 26, he says, "Among you stands one whom you do not know." Now, granted, at this point, this could simply mean that Jesus had not revealed himself yet to anybody. Yet, at the very least, it does foreshadow the problems ahead, which we will talk about when we get to John chapter 5, verse 39. Speaking of foreshadowing. For now, though, it is enough to note that the very religious, the very devout, those who diligently studied Scripture and who knew all the do's and all the don'ts, did not recognize who Jesus was. How tragic that those trying so hard to do everything right could not see Jesus for all the religious trees. Now, and this is something very, very important, religion here is not being criticized. It is the allowing of religion to grow so big in our minds that we lose sight of and forget who the religion is designed to worship. See, we must know the one that our religion points to. It is not merely good enough to know the fact that it points. Who knew so much could come out of reading one passage out loud? And we haven't even hit upon the second nuance yet. So, nuance number 2. Here, in the very first chapter of John, we are given an example of how to live. Well, simply put, John is very humble. In verses 19 through 22, he does not claim to be more than he is. Then, in verse 23, he plainly states who he is. See, he neither claims to be who he is not, nor does he deny who he is. There is no false humility here. It is a simple and honest dealing with the world as it is. And in verse 27, he not only shows he has a humble and realistic perspective on himself, but also he has one on who Jesus is. Jesus is the Messiah, and he, John, is unworthy of laying claim to the lowliest of services that he could perform for Jesus. He says he is not even worthy to help him take off his shoes. Now, this reminds me of a question. What is man that you think about him? Which is found in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 6, and several other places as well. This is not self-defacement or denial. It is an honest assessment of who he is when compared with God. It is the importance of knowing who you are in addition to knowing who God is. And you know, this reminds me of our conversation that we had about Psalms 3 and David's honest assessment of himself and of God. Now, I'll link to that video in the description box below. But this seems to be a theme that is now running throughout the Bible. It seems that making an honest assessment of yourself and of God is part of living the abundant life. Well, you just picked up a bonus nuance. Don't worry about it. It's on the house. Well, next time, we will pick up in verse 29. Well, there you go, and there you know. At least some of the nuances that I heard while reading these verses. Nuances that reveal the importance of knowing the who. Now, does any of this ring true to you? If not, why not? Did you hear other nuances from this reading? Do you have another take on these verses? I would love to hear what you think. So please, tell me in the comments section below. Also, now as you read passages aloud, you may wind up having some questions, ones that aren't necessarily obvious from the passage just read. When this happens, you might want a good commentary or two to check with to see if you can find what's being said or answer your questions. Now, there are some very wonderful commentaries on John around. I will link to 4 of these in the comments section below. Now, these were chosen because they were easy to read, they're at a lower cost, and I love them dearly. I use them all the time. Now, if you decide to get any of them, please use these links as they're affiliate links, and they will help support this channel. Thank you very much. Now also, I'm going to link to a wonderful website, BibleHub.com. Not only can you read several different translations here, there are also some wonderful commentaries you can use. And it's all free. And no, they are not a sponsor. They don't even know I'm alive. But in addition to the books I've listed below, I frequently use this site, and I love it. And if you like what you have heard so far, please click the like and the subscribe buttons below. And then once you click that big red subscribe button, make sure to hit that little gray bell icon, for that will tell YouTube that you want to be notified each time a new video is posted. And one final thing. Please pray for me that I stay honest and true to what we are reading. See, better men than I have started very well and have fallen. Please ask God to help me stay humble, honest, standing, and conversational. Thank you. Well, until next time, love simply, love wisely, and love well. For that is where excitement and meaning dwell.